Hey guys, Hidden Truths here. Welcome to this new video with a bunch of new stories. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers and I think we can do it with your help. So please subscribe. It would honestly mean a lot to me. Now, let's get right into the stories.
Snow pressed against the glass roof of the Boston Museum of Horology with a persistent hush, as though the sky itself tried to muffle every tick echoing through the galleries. I arrived just past 6, breath fogging in the unheated atrium, expecting the familiar metronome of security lights and distant gears. Instead I met silence, generator hum absent, motion sensors unblinking, all the electronic guardians lulled by a citywide power outage. My footsteps sounded brittle on marble. Routine, Graham, I told myself, but the word felt brittle too. I walked the perimeter with a penlight, sweeping it across pendulum regulators and skeleton clocks that usually glimmered beneath halogens. Their brass faces glowed dimly in the narrow cone like relics at the bottom of a frozen pond. When I reached the Heritage Vault, 3 inches of tempered glass inset into a mahogany alcove, I saw the reflection of my own beam, then nothing behind it. Where my father's 1890 Ainsworth Hunter once lay, cushioned on midnight velvet, there was only empty darkness. My hand met the glass, breath caught. Gone. I toggled the latch, it opened without protest, its electronic lock evidently dead along with the mains. Inside, a faint indentation marked the spot where the pocket watch had rested since I accepted the curator post 9 years earlier. I flicked the torch upward, a hairline fracture jagged across the hinge of the glass pane, subtle, precise, like an incision made by someone who understood both fragility and force. Snow hissed above, wind rattled joists, yet the vault smelled of machine oil and old mahogany, not intrusion. For a moment I waited, absurdly, for the familiar triple beat of the Ainsworth's train ticking. Only storm gusts answered, soft as distant applause. Father's voice nudged memory, keep it ticking, son, even if my heart can't. He had pressed the watch into my palm 2 nights before he slipped away, its case warm from his fever. I promised, of course, precision had always cloaked our silences better than any words. Now the watch, his watch, was gone, and precision offered no alibi. The emergency manual for outages directed staff to gather at the security office, but the blizzard had stranded half the city. I alone had reached the museum, the night guard's chair downstairs sat empty, coat still draped over the rail as though he had stepped out for coffee that never arrived. I checked the logbook, last round recorded at 4:17 a.m., signature illegible, a note, heard creaking near North Gallery, likely roof stress. Nothing about the vault. I scanned the marble floor, a faint constellation of moisture glistened, leading toward the north corridor where vents breathed frigid air over parquet. The droplets smelled faintly mineral, the meltwater of tracking snow, not the usual humidity from the heating system. I followed, penlight dancing over portraits of master horologists whose painted eyes tracked my progress. At the corridor's end, towering metal doors barred the way to the archival wing, sealed automatically every night at 11. Their hydraulic bolts required power to disengage, yet half an inch of frost-powdered snow had slipped beneath, forming tiny ridges echoing a set of prints, one forward passage, one returning. Someone had entered after the outage began, stepped through snow blowing in from a roof vent, and exited with equal haste. Inside that wing, I tried the handle, locked firm. Without electricity the mechanism wouldn't budge. Whoever walked those steps either possessed the master key or found another entrance. A memory surfaced, Evelyn Park, our chief restoration expert, mentioning last month that the north wing chimney flue still allowed access during scaffold work. She had laughed at my raised brow, only pigeons and fools would risk that climb in winter. The scaffold stood dismantled now, but her words haunted the prince. Evelyn revered provenance yet despised auction politics, she often lamented the board's plan to sell select pieces to bankroll expansion. The Ainsworth, though, was never on that list. It belonged, by loan agreement, to me until my retirement, after which the museum would permanently acquire it. Motive eluded me. Yet the archival wing housed our microlathes, jeweling benches, and Evelyn's private bench with its array of minuscule files. If one needed to quiet a damaged escapement, or extract a secret, no better place existed. A wind gust rattled the skylight above, showering ice crystals that pinged off brass. Somewhere a mainspring snapped inside an unwound clock, the ping sharp as breaking glass. I felt time itself stumble. Focus. First secure the other artifacts, then trace the prints before warmth erased them. But even as I turned back toward the vault corridor, a single peculiar note floated through the hush, the faintest metallic chime, as though a tiny hammer had struck a comb tooth. Not the straightforward tick of a watch, but the opening of a music box, truncated after one uncertain note. The sound drifted from the ceiling, specifically the spiral staircase leading up to the tower room where the 1845 Bingham regulator kept official museum time. Few ventured there, the climb was narrow, the tower unheated, the great clock reliable enough to require attention only monthly. I trained my penlight upward. Dust motes floated in the beam like arrested snowflakes. Another chime rang, half a tone higher, then ceased. My pulse echoed louder than any gear. If the Ainsworth had truly vanished into a storm-dark night, why did its old heart, disguised as melody, echo above me now? The question sent a shiver sharper than the draft slithering down the stairwell. I started the climb, each iron step ringing with a hollow promise that the mystery, and perhaps my father's request, waited at the dawnlit pinnacle. Iron treads groaned beneath me, each rise narrowing until the stairwell felt like a throat-swallowing light. My pen beam quivered over brickwork frosted with condensation, it smelled of rust and old kerosene, a private climate untouched by central heat. Halfway up, the metallic chime returned, 2 notes this time, stitched together like the hesitant start of a lullaby. Not the tower regulator, I realized, that clock could boom a Westminster quarter, never a music box trill. The sound drifted downward, not upward. Someone, or something, had coaxed me off course. I paused at a landing and steadied my breath until only the pulse in my ears kept tempo. Silence settled, thick as felt between escapement teeth. I descended again, boots echoing, my shadow looping over walls like a minute hand that couldn't decide its direction. Back on marble, the prints of meltwater had already blurred at their edges, warmth from ducts resurrected by the backup generator nibbling their definition. I crouched, tracing one outline with a gloved finger, narrow heel, slight outward splay, Evelyn's gait, if memory served. She favored flat Oxfords, soles etched with a tiny chevron. There it was, at the edge of a puddle, the faint chevron cut. The trail ended at the archival doors, locked silent. Evelyn, what storm blew you here? I fetched the mechanical override key from security, its brass blade nearly obsolete in our era of biometric panels, and returned. Metal protested, but finally bolts sheared aside with a sigh. Cold air greeted me, laced with the scent of shellac, camphor, and brass filings, as distinctive as any perfume. The archival wing lay in gloom, shelving units loomed like regimented pines, their labels, French repeater parts, verge escapements, cylinder blanks, catching my light. A lone desk lamp burned near the conservation bench, its filament ember orange against blackout darkness. Someone had jury-rigged a portable inverter to power that single bulb, cables snaked to a marine battery on the floor. Beneath the lamp, spread across green baize, lay a nest of tissue-wrapped components, the Ainsworth's familiar silver case split open, its dial removed, revealing an inner shell no catalogue had ever described, a second, much smaller chamber. The drum sat exposed, claws and bearings carefully laid aside. Next to it, a stack of archival documents waited, edges crumbling like puff pastry. Frostmelt dripped from Evelyn's coat, draped on a stool, to puddle beside the battery. Absent, she had slipped deeper into the warren or perhaps back to the tower when I turned away. I lifted the top document. Diary paper, ink brown to sepia, dated January 1901. The slanted hand belonged to Frederick Ainsworth himself. Delivered the hunter to Miss Clara Moreau under secrecy. Installed miniature cylinder of her unfinished nocturne inside secondary barrel at her request. Must ensure regulators dampen resonance so melody remains unheard until repaired. Clara Moreau, the prodigious pianist who vanished from Paris recitals and resurfaced briefly in New England before disappearing altogether. Legends claimed she fled an arranged marriage, others whispered of debt, but music historians mourned an opus left incomplete, the Nocturne in D-sharp, missing its final bars. I scanned further. She fears pursuit. Says melody is her passport, must remain hidden until she can finish it in safe harbor. A gust rattled vent louvers, scattering fine shavings across the bench. I brushed them aside. Beneath, a fresh schematic in Evelyn's tidy print showed torque values and note positions, as if she orchestrated surgery on the dormant music box. A second page bore a timetable: remove cylinder, reshaft, repin equals, rebalance by 4:30, return before auction, appraisal team arrives Saturday. Today was Friday. She raced dawn. So the watch never measured minutes, it kept a secret score. I remembered nights as a boy when father held the watch to his ear, eyes distant. Did he hear ghost notes? Or had the melody fallen silent after decades of friction? Either way, the promise he extracted from me, keep it ticking, had carried more gravity than I knew. Footsteps clicked beyond the shelving. I killed the lamp, plunging us into near darkness, and slipped between aisles where tower window snow glow suffused the corridor in faint blue. Evelyn emerged 3 rows ahead, arms cradling a slender lathe spindle, goggles pushed to her brow, white streak of premature stress bright in her dark hair. I stepped forward, the floor creaked. She froze, eyes narrowing behind fogged lenses, then relaxed fractionally when the penlight caught my face. "Graham," she exhaled, voice frayed. "You weren't meant to see this until it sang." I approached the pool of cold light cast by the skylight, every tick of distant gallery clocks suddenly accusatory. "You bypassed the vault, Evelyn. Broke the hinge." She winced. "A hairline cut, no damage to frame. The board plans to auction the Hunter next quarter, appraisal starts tomorrow. They'll never discover the cylinder in a routine inspection, but a private buyer might, only to part it out." She lifted the spindle, where a tiny roll of brass glittered, pinholes arranged like constellations. "Clara's last notes, Graham. Half a melody waiting 70 years. I couldn't let it vanish into some collector's drawer." Anger and awe wrestled in my chest. Snowmelt dribbled from her sleeves, mapping new footprints. "You should have told me," I said, though accusation felt weak amid her devotion. She met my gaze, unflinching. "Would you have risked your father's legacy on rumors?" The question struck harder than any alarm. My silence answered. Outside, wind flung sleet against leaded panes, dawn's first pallor seeped along the clerestory, indicating time Elise Park no longer had for secrecy. She extended the spindle toward me, palm open. "Help me finish it," she pleaded. "Let the watch keep its promise to Clara, then decide what to do." I felt the brass cylinders chill, like holding a captured heartbeat. Far above, the tower bells marked 5:30 with somber resonance. We had perhaps 30 minutes before power restoration, security, and ordinary time reclaimed dominion. Decision hovered, fragile as escapement teeth. I weighed museum protocol against the hush of unfinished music and heard my father's voice through the storm of memory. "Not every gear measures hours, son, some carry stories." The spindle gleamed, waiting. And somewhere in the dark, the watch case lay open, ready to breathe again. I lowered the penlight, letting the skylight's dim wash shape Evelyn's face instead. She looked utterly spent, cheeks hollowed by sleepless nights and cold air, but her eyes held the steady gleam of someone who had already accepted the consequences. The silence between us felt like the brief pause in a clock train when one gear releases another, fragile, irrevocable. I turned the brass cylinder in my hand, its teeth were faintly nicked, evidence of decades rubbing against a mainspring designed for time, not melody. "Father, did you ever guess what beat beneath those hands?" A childhood image rose, unbidden. I was 10, feverish with flu, and father sat at my bedside while snow clattered the gutters of our Worcester house. He tucked the Ainsworth under my pillow, saying the tick would pace my dreams so they wouldn't run wild. In the half-light the watch seemed alive, not ticking but pulsing, distinct from the grandfather clock downstairs. I drifted to sleep convinced the case held a tiny heart. Later that night I woke at some restless hour and pressed my ear to the pillow. The beat was different, slower, punctuated by a faint, uneven hum, almost like someone breathing through reeds. A mechanical sigh, I thought, then. Now, with Evelyn's cylinder warming in my palm, I recognized what I'd heard, the muted ghost of music dampened by regulation screws. My father must have known, and yet he never opened the case, never uttered Clara's name. He simply repeated, year after year, keep it ticking. I met Evelyn's gaze. We'll need the microlathe and a pin vise, I said, voice barely above whisper. Relief slid across her features, replaced by brisk focus. She strode back to the bench, lighting another oil lamp for steadier glow, then rolled a tray of jeweling tools into reach. The room brightened in amber pools, brass shafts throwing long double shadows across catalog drawers. Outside, wind still howled, but dawn's blue tempered it to distant static. She unscrewed the template brace and examined the cylinder. Ainsworth used softer brass than modern music boxes, she murmured. Pins shear if we rush. She handed me a loop, I anchored the spindle in the vise while she sorted hair-thin replacement pins from a vial. We worked in near silence, her gloved fingers steady despite cold. I counted rotations, set depth stops, and pressed each new pin through pre-punched holes left blank by Clara's hurried design. Every insertion felt like striking a match inside a library of dust-dry books, one slip, and everything could blaze. Between motions, memory spooled again. Father on the porch one summer evening, watch ticking against the crook of his elbow while he mended a torn kite for me. I'd asked why he never wore it like other men. He smiled, said pockets keep secrets warmer than wrists. I thought he meant the polished silver feared rain, now I wondered if he meant the music growing safe in darkness, shielded from listeners until it was whole. Evelyn's breath clouded the glass of her loop as she leaned closer. Last pin, she whispered, sliding it home with a practiced twist. Tiny brass dust clung to the lamp glow, drifting like gold pollen. She withdrew the spindle, gave it a tentative wind, and released. A tremor ran through the brass, but no sound, the governor was still detached. She fetched the restored case halves, their engraved cartouche gleaming, Tempus Fugit, Musica Manet, Time Flies, Music Remains. We exchanged a glance, irony needs no voice in a workshop full of ticking ghosts. Another memory overlapped, intrusive and sharp, my first tour of the museum vault as newly hired curator. Evelyn guided me past shelves of carriage clocks, her voice soft for fear of unsettling hairspring regulators. When we reached the Ainsworth she paused, observing how my hand lingered on the case. Later, over coffee, she confessed the piece felt different, as if it contained more space inside than physics allowed. I laughed then, blaming her sentimentality. Now I saw that moment for what it was, her first suspicion, the seed of tonight's gamble. The clock tower struck 6, one resonant gong amplified through cast iron lattice. Power would return any minute, sprinkler systems would pressurize, alarms would reboot, and the museum would breathe sterile order again. Evelyn snapped the rear cover onto the watch, hands nimble. We must hear it once, she said, urgency threading her calm. Clara deserves an ear before bureaucracy clamped shut. But the mainspring's half-wound, I cautioned. She smiled, small, defiant. Enough for 40 seconds. We turned the crown together. The watch vibrated, a software-like wings unfolding. Then, from its belly, a melody rose, tentative, crystalline, the opening arpeggio of Clara's nocturne resolving into a new passage I'd never encountered in any scholarly fragment. Notes spilled delicate as snowmelt drops, each one luminous, almost painful in their clarity. The tune climbed, hovering on a suspended chord that felt like held breath, then descended into a gentle cadence that settled somewhere deep inside the ribs. When the final note shimmered into silence, both of us stayed motionless, as though even blinking might erase it. Footsteps pounded in the distant lobby, security arriving with restored power. Sprinkler pipes shuddered overhead, lights flickered to fluorescent life, washing the archival wing in stern white. The fragile spell fractured. Evelyn closed the watch, slipped it into my palm. "Your choice now," she said, voice barely audible over reawakening HVAC fans. "Exhibit the watch for profit, or let the music finish its journey." Alarm boards relit crimson across the aisle, countdown beeps signaling systems check. I tucked the hunter into my jacket just as guards rounded the corner, radios crackling. Their eyes widened at sight of the open vault door behind us. I stepped forward, pulse steadying with decision not yet voiced aloud. Some timepieces keep minutes, others safeguard something harder to measure. The guards demanded explanation. I gestured toward the tower stairs. "We'll give it in the clock room," I said, words forming quicker than thought. Evelyn met my glance, surprise, then fierce gratitude, and followed as I led the procession upward toward dawn's pale halo, where choice and consequence waited gear-meshed. The iron staircase spiraled upward, each tread ringing beneath the cluster of guards whose boots snapped the hush like missaid escapements. I climbed ahead, jacket pressed to my chest where the hunter lay warm from our repairs, Evelyn just behind me, her gaze fixed on the back of my collar as though she could read intent in the weave. Above, pale dawn seeped through the tower's louvers, striping the brick throat with silver that brightened step by step. Halfway, I felt doubts tug, reveal the theft and preserve professional order or shield Evelyn and risk scandal that could shear the museum's reputation like a mainspring over wound. Yet Clara's melody still reverberated inside my ribs, a slow, luminous echo that refused to be filed under incident reports. Music is a form of time, I realized, measured not by seconds but by remembrance. We emerged in the tower chamber, breath frosting the stagnant air. The great Bingham regulator loomed 3 meters tall, its enamel dial pointing perpetually to the city's official hour. Snow whirled beyond slatted vents, sweeping into dusty oak floor, and somewhere beneath that hushed the harbor sounded a foghorn, one solemn note announcing morning. I faced the guards, their radios sputtered electric chatter, but protocol faltered here, in this liminal room where brass governed silence more than authority did. I spoke before they could. "The vault hinge cracked from age," I said, voice even. Ms. Park opened the watch to secure a mechanism that threatened to fail during tonight's outage. I authorized restoration. Not precisely lie nor truth, but an interlocking of both, like overlapping wheels sharing a single arbor. The captain frowned, glancing at Evelyn's oil-stained gloves and the cable trailing from her improvised inverter, but the stairwell allowed no line of sight to the archival chaos below. He demanded documentation. I gestured to my breast pocket. "All notes are enclosed within the artifact," I said, and drew the watch, offering its closed case. He hesitated. Curators seldom relinquished objects without gloves, then accepted, turning it beneath the weak skylight. The case looked unchanged, surface still showing the faint scratches decades of pocket carry had bestowed. Only if one removed the backplate would Clara's cylinder reveal itself, repinned and ready. The captain weighed it, probably listening for tick that remained reassuringly crisp. "We'll log this into evidence until the director reviews," he decided, sliding it into a felt pouch. My pulse kicked, but I accepted the choice. Better the watch rest in controlled custody than on an auctioneer's pedestal. Paperwork unfurled, statements taken, incident numbers scribbled, but dawn poured brighter, filling the tower with pewter light that lent everything the aura of old tintypes. When the guards finally descended, responsibilities satisfied, only Evelyn and I remained with the regulator's solemn pendulum. Its slow sweep imitated breathing. Evelyn exhaled, shoulders slumping as adrenaline drained. "You sacrificed your father's legacy," she murmured. I shook my head. He asked me to keep it ticking, not caged. I crossed to the window slit, watching snow fall through weak sunrise. "The board will return the watch to evidence storage, once insurance clears, will propose a scholarly paper on Clara's cylinder. The melody will outlive policy. She stepped beside me, eyes reflecting the wan gold cresting rooftops. Do you think they'll let me finish aligning the pins? She asked. I smiled, a faint click of hope. I'll write the recommendation myself. Silence settled, broken only by the Bingham's escapement, a deep, confident wonk every second. We stood there until the sky blushed salmon and the city rooftops glimmered under their snow caps. Voices downstairs announced arrival of the director and conservators. The day would soon bristle with questions. I pulled a small envelope from inside my cuff. It contained one brass pin Evelyn had set aside, deemed surplus after balancing the air governor. I placed it on the sill between us. A spare heartbeat, I said. In case the music ever falters again. She closed her fingers around it, gratitude flickering across her expression like sunlight on water. We descended to meet the committee, but my thoughts stayed with Clara, the runaway pianist who hid her unfinished song inside a timepiece and trusted posterity to rescue it. She had gambled on the kindness of strangers who would never hear her play. Evelyn had gambled on me. I had gambled on the belief that legacies breathe best when shared. Risk accepted, I thought, finding unexpected calm in the decision. Later, after statements and signatures, insurance assessors rolled out their measuring tapes while journalists rattled doors for comment. I slipped away to the mezzanine balcony, overlooking the galleries where clocks chimed the half-hour in polite polyphony. Below, the empty velvet cradle in the vault reflected a shard of winter sun, a hollow yet gleaming promise. Somewhere in evidence lock-up, the hunter rested, its cylinder poised, ready to sing not for bidders but for listeners. I closed my eyes and imagined the finished nocturne, Clara's fingertips completing the final cadence, notes lingering in parquet air long after the last vibration faded. The museum's future expansion would tout new wings and cafes, yet none of those additions would feel as alive as that small, secret song winding through gears older than all of us. A distant door clicked, the day's routine reasserted itself. I opened my notebook and recorded the morning's events in neat, slanted script, concluding with a line father once etched on a scrap of watch paper I'd kept all these years. Some timepieces measure hours, others hold the seconds we never knew we'd lost.